This video is about Donald Trump's military parade. And the notable No King protest, of course. First of all, June 14th is Donald Trump's 79th birthday. Remember, his birthday is on June 14th, just so happens. If you look at it this way, the Army, Navy, and Air Force, the National Guard, and many of these commemorative days, he and the Army, share the same birthday, which is quite a coincidence. It's also the 250th anniversary of the founding of the Army. At the same time, he was celebrating. He really enjoyed the military parade. His wish came true. He finally had a military parade on his 79th birthday. It cost 30 to 40 million US dollars. First, let me tell you all, I watched the parade, and it cracked me up. Do you know why? Americans don't know how to do military parades. A proper parade takes long-term practice. What I saw was, they used a rope at the front. They even set up a frame to show how high to kick their legs. It's all about training until everything is in sync. The female soldiers in mainland China, they're all amazing. Everyone is exactly the same height, and their movements are totally synchronized. When you look at them, they look powerful and imposing. But when I saw the American soldiers marching, they were laughing quietly to themselves, gently, waving warmly and enthusiastically at the crowd. It was the opposite. I actually asked some Americans who served in the military, and they said they're not trained in marching drills. Basically, they run together, but they don't practice marching drills. Marching drills are just for parades. When it comes to actual combat, they don't do marching drills, like the goose step. And besides, others kick their legs really high, but American soldiers just walk. If you take a look, there are a few different ways to march. In the past, German infantry called it the goose step, where they lift their legs up high. They raise their legs really high, and there are different ways to move their arms and legs, as well as different swinging techniques. The UK still has some parades, and when people from the mainland came to Hong Kong, the police there learned the marching style from the mainland. It's about whether it's left hand with right foot or right hand with left foot. And how high you raise your hand. Every country does it differently, except for the US. They just do, whatever they want. There's no consistency at all when it comes to their parades. They mobilize 7,000 officers and soldiers and 1,500 military vehicles, the 60-ton M1 main battle tank, and Stryker armored vehicles, plus 62 military aircraft. How does that even show off their military strength? It's actually pretty interesting. This is how it is in other countries. Military parades are popular in democratic countries. France, for example, has a tradition of holding military parades. Especially on France's National Day, they hold a big military parade on that day. But the United States doesn't do that, as a matter of policy. In the Soviet Union or Russia, their parades are all about showing off their latest weapons, dragging out their biggest missile. He didn't, as far as I know, threaten you. On the same day across the US, there were 2,000 No King protests. From Los Angeles all the way to New York. It seemed like the biggest crowds were in Pennsylvania, because there were 100,000 people in the place where the United States was founded. This was the largest protest since Donald Trump returned to the White House. I have done some data collection. It is strange. This is the media's responsibility, but people don't collect data. The largest protest in the United States was the anti-Vietnam War protest, which had 800,000 people at once. But if you actually count all the protests across the country, the largest turnout was actually at the Women's March. In 2017, it was a protest against Donald Trump's election, and the estimates for that event were between 3.7 million and 5.2 million people. That's the largest in history. Did yesterday break that record? Yesterday's estimates were a few million people, but later on. There will be a more accurate estimate, but it probably didn't break the all-time record. Still, it was close. Protesters were chanting that no one is above the law. They shouted, "No to the king," criticizing Donald Trump for putting himself above the Constitution. This is why the military parade was criticized as a waste of public funds. Authoritarian display, narcissistic engineering, and America. Traditional democratic values are inconsistent. When is the military parade? I'll tell you later. Donald Trump is reviewing Stand to Watch and gave a brief speech to thank the soldiers. In fact, he knew he couldn't be too high profile because there were protests that day. Our soldiers will never give up, never surrender. But saying this is unnecessary, American soldiers do surrender. When they're at an absolute disadvantage, the U.S. doesn't advocate fighting to the death. They actually support surrender. Fight, fight, fight. He's just talking about himself. Victory after victory, time and again. In Manhattan and Brooklyn, there were about 20 protests, just in one park. There were thousands of people braving the rain to join. I saw in a few places. In Chicago, those were crowds of tens of thousands. The whole street was packed with people. Those MAGA supporters say these people are completely brainwashed. The New York police blocked off Fifth Avenue from 42nd Street to 23rd Street. The protesters held up their signs in an orderly manner, with slogans opposing Donald Trump and ICE. Overall, it was peaceful. One person was arrested. I saw online that an 80-year-old veteran was taken into custody. He was using a cane and crossed a police line, and was finally handcuffed by the officers. There was a photo like that, and people were saying, "You're a veteran. You served the country. You're 80 years old. You shouldn't be breaking the law." Here's how I see it. If there's a police line, and someone crosses that line, should they be arrested? Not necessarily, since it's a pretty minor offense. If an 80-year-old crosses the police line, he's not going to pose any danger to you. You just make him go back. There's no need to put handcuffs on him. This person isn't going to hurt anyone, and it's not like you're the president worried about someone trying to assassinate you. There's really no need for handcuffs. Yeah, it's just not appropriate. But you just send him back. It's really easy to cross the police line. Technically, it's really easy to break the law. Some Americans have said that the U.S. is facing a major crisis of democracy, and I agree. Donald Trump has made the situation in LA worse, and deploying troops for that reason is unconstitutional. The issue is this kind of speculation about motives. Are you sending ICE into key areas, like those communities or campuses, to arrest people and stir up opposition, just to boost your own popularity? I don't know about that. Are you really doing it on purpose? A 61-year-old nurse at Philadelphia's Love Park said she wanted to defend democracy. One of the reasons she took to the streets was because Donald Trump cut staff at public health agencies, though that wasn't the only reason. Defending democracy and Donald Trump said he would strictly enforce federal health insurance. By reviewing federal health insurance, some lose eligibility, and this could save $100 billion a year. As a result, a lot of people would be kicked out. Let me explain this to everyone here, those undocumented immigrants in particular. They actually pay taxes, about $130 billion US every year. Now you have the tax information from the IRS. If you give it to ICE, they won't pay taxes. So you'd be losing over $100 billion, and on top of that, you'd have to spend hundreds of billions more to go after them. You'd need to hire a lot of people just to catch them. In Houston, some protesters gave flowers to the police officers maintaining order. This is what I support. I don't support being hostile towards the police. Being hostile to the police does you no good. No matter what the police's attitude is, you shouldn't be hostile. Don't be hostile towards the people on the front lines. You are fighting for a demonstration or protest like this. The support of the disciplinary forces, it doesn't matter if he doesn't support it. But at least it softened his attitude. You are not hostile to him. In California and North Carolina, It was almost like a dance party with cheerful music. Everyone was happy, and overall it was peaceful. Of course, there have been incidents across the country. Back in Hong Kong, don't blame Hong Kongers. I've taken part in countless protests. What moved me the most was that time we surrounded the Legislative Council. We went to surround Legco. Then it started pouring rain, and we walked around the Legislative Council for a while. What happened next? The event had to end right in the middle of the heavy rain. Everyone started cleaning up the garbage. That's what Hong Kong protesters are like. That kind of character, that level of quality, is truly incomparable. That sense of peace and rationality. If you always remain peaceful and rational, if you always hold the moral high ground, it's hard for anyone to attack you. The well-known American actor Mark Ruffalo had immigrant clearly written on his forehead. Protesters continued to gather in LA, facing off against the National Guard and the Marines stationed at the Federal Building. Marines, get out of LA. The scene was tense. This was the flashpoint. This was the flashpoint. I remember that day clearly. Hong Kong canceled a containment policy. Why was there a containment policy before? Because if those people made it into the city and you tried to arrest them, it would cause panic among the public. That was the first reason why, once they entered the city, they were allowed to stay there. Second, it was very easy for them to become part of the underground population. Because those people couldn't show themselves in public, they could be forced into prostitution, or slavery, or drug trafficking. That was a major concern. If illegal immigrants had already entered the city, the best thing to do was to grant them amnesty. That was the basic principle behind the touch-base policy at the time. Do you understand what I mean? Right. It was actually pretty funny. I always say Hong Kong's touch-base policy was incredibly clever. It wasn't intentional, though. So what happened was, you had to swim across Ho Hai Bay and then climb over Wutong Mountain. First, it was a swimming competition, then a mountain climbing competition. There were guard dogs chasing you, and then you had to sneak past them. Border Patrol officers then ran too. Urban wood competition. This is actually an obstacle course. The winners were both smart and strong, and they'd immediately go to work. It weeded out the weaker ones. Of course, only the young and able could make it through. As a result, it was actually very beneficial for Hong Kong's economy. In LA, they finally issued a dispersal order and fired tear gas and flashbangs. A curfew was imposed on downtown at 8 p.m. that day. Honestly, it was a minor incident. If they hadn't made a fuss, it would have died down overnight. They stopped making arrests. This is what you'd call making trouble out of nothing. This incident is very serious. I'll detail it tomorrow. A Democratic Party legislator from Minnesota and her husband, she's not just any legislator, she's a former speaker. Someone pretended to be a police officer and entered their home, killed her and her husband, and then went on to another place. He continued pretending to be a police officer at a second house. This person had a hit list, which included Governor Walz. They've already found a hit list with dozens of names on it. And everyone he wanted to kill was a Democrat. He saw his message on social media. He's against, well, to be fair, he didn't say he was part of the MAGA camp, but of course he's not. A Democrat. He's very targeted towards people who support abortion, planning to kill those. He's anti-abortion, and in the past, when there were protests against the MAGA camp, he was there to confront the anti-MAGA protesters. This person is in his 50s. We're being very fair about this situation. That's just how it is, but this was a premeditated murder. Police found, in the shooter's car, a list of state legislators, list of officials and leaflets for the Kingless Day demonstration. All protests in Minnesota have been canceled because of fears of retaliatory attacks. Texas received credible threats saying that state legislators participating in the protests State legislators may be attacked, and there have been several violent demonstrations, all involving MAGA supporters attacking these protest crowds. The state legislature was evacuated, and arrests were made. One suspect, there was another suspect who tried to go after those people. Inciting hatred is truly shameful, especially in a country like this, no matter which side you're on. You can't treat the other side as villains, as people you can just kill. That's not acceptable. Doing so destroys the entire democratic system. The 50501 movement, 50 states. 50 protests, one movement. It was an earlier demonstration. It supported democracy and opposed Donald Trump's authoritarian control. The movement accused Donald Trump. The government ignored the court ruling, expelled American citizens, and put people on the streets. To disappear without reason, attacking civil rights, and cutting public services. That means you can absolutely agree, if you wish. Or disagree, no one is against. Stopping illegal immigration at the border. No one has ever opposed that. In the city, if that person is an illegal immigrant and has committed a crime. If you can prove they've committed a crime and that they're an illegal immigrant, then you deport them. Right. If they've committed a crime, you should deport them. But if you go into the city to search for and arrest illegal immigrants, that's a very dangerous action. It's extremely risky. Because many of these illegal immigrants have been in the US for 20 or 30 years, working really hard and paying taxes. The organization declares its opposition to authoritarian rule and politics that favor the wealthy, as well as the militarization of national democracy, while waving the American flag high. Reciting the presidential oath, I tell you, the oath of office of the President of the United States is truly about loyalty to the Constitution. Defending the law, this is a prerequisite. It's not just about picking someone, and then using any means necessary to achieve your goals. Do you get what I'm saying? For example, if I were to choose, let's say, hypothetically, I had to pick a US president to improve the lives of the poor, to make things better, and everyone votes him in. Can he just go ahead and confiscate? It is not right for the richest people to use their money to distribute to the poor. It depends on what means you use. The means must be loyal to the Constitution and uphold the law. Let me tell you, this is the difference between democracy and populism. I explain it in the most vivid way. What we call democracy exists under universal values, truly. Meaning there is a set of values that stands above the decisions of the majority. If the will of the majority is everything, let me ask you, if 100 people vote and 51 agree, to kill the other 49, is that acceptable? What if they kill 26 or 25, is that okay? If there are only 2 left and one kills the other, is that right? With just 2 people, there's no majority, so is that okay? No, it's not. You have to act according to the rules, the framework that elected you. There's a framework that binds you, and you can't break it. This framework, when you're elected, you're supposed to pledge allegiance to the Constitution and protect the law. Right. On days without a king. The national flag doesn't belong to the Donald Trump administration. It belongs to all of us, the people, I call, to say no to the throne, the crown, and the monarch. Donald Trump said, I want to be fair and quote what Donald Trump said. There are a lot of restrictions on what I do. I'm not a king. This is a very weak explanation. The real issue now is, are you repeatedly challenging the Constitution? For example, the Constitution, in black and white, is written very clearly. Those born in the United States are automatically granted U.S. citizenship, yet you actually issued a presidential order to expel those people. This is blatantly violating the Constitution. These protests are mainly directed at Donald Trump's crackdown on immigration policies and cuts to the federal budget, as well as deploying the National Guard and Marines without the governor's consent. These are all unconstitutional actions. This is indisputable. It's written very clearly. Everyone born in the United States, regardless of whether they're parents, are U.S. citizens or not, will be granted American citizenship. It's very clear, leaving no room for misunderstanding. yet you still want to expel them. Issuing presidential orders. Protesters. Criticize Donald Trump for making his billionaire friends even richer while cutting public services for ordinary people. Let me tell you, the U.S. has a $7 trillion budget. Over $4 trillion of that is for statutory entitlements. What are statutory entitlements? They're things like pensions and public assistance. Medicare helps seniors over 60 years old. Medicaid is for people who are struggling financially. If you don't cut these, you really can't reduce the government budget. That's why I said from the start that Elon Musk was bound to fail, because these things aren't being cut. Almost $5 trillion is already spent here. So how are you supposed to make cuts? If you intensify class conflict and social injustice, you have to address these issues. You need to use high technology to solve the problem of soaring medical costs. High-tech solutions are needed. Take Salt Lake City, for example. There were protests that escalated into shootings, with someone opening fire. A suspect was arrested, and in a northern Atlanta community, 8 people were taken into custody. In Ohio, there were clashes and arrests between Donald Trump supporters and protesters. If someone comes out to protest in support of the district government that day, I'm against holding counter-protests. What exactly is a counter-protest? When others are protesting, and you organize a protest against them just because they're protesting. Those people are extremely hyped up. Their spirits are through the roof in the crowd. They're really fired up. If you go and counter-protest, it's bound to end in a fight. If you want to protest, go protest somewhere else, you know. Don't organize counter-protests. A lot of the time, these protests end up with people clashing with the protesters. I don't support disrupting other people's protests, you know. Others have the right to protest. Let them protest, if that is what they choose. In Virginia, a 21-year-old man drove his car into people leaving a protest. He was arrested after plowing into the crowd. If you go up there and do that X, you'll see I have X. I've been to X before. It's full of hate speech, encouraging people to kill leftists. They think these leftists aren't even human. These kinds of statements, when you promote them, actually, this is a big problem. Polls show that this is in California. 54% of Americans supported deporting illegal immigrants, while 46% were against it. Now, support has dropped to about 42%. Some believe Donald Trump's policies make them feel safer, but society is clearly divided. If you think that among so many illegal immigrants there must be some bad people, then just arrest the bad ones. No one is absolutely against that at all. No one is against that. Just deport them, but you have to prove they're actually bad people. You have to prove they're illegal immigrants. You can't just say they are and that's it. You know what I mean. Security experts say that in Washington, the military parade and the armed standoff with soldiers on the streets of LA during protests make for a subtle contrast. The protest scenes and the parade happened on the same day. It's absolutely, truly full of irony. The military is in an awkward position. The last parade was in 1991, when George H.W. Bush celebrated victory in the Gulf War with a parade. That one was more like a triumph, you know, like when the Romans won a war. They held a triumphal procession. That time, it was a huge victory, and back then, the streets were packed with cheering crowds. This time, no one was watching because it was raining and cold. I don't know why, but let me tell you all. The polarization in the United States, the issue of national division, is extremely serious. It's very serious. If anyone keeps fueling hatred, whether it's against the MAGA camp, or if the MAGA camp encourages hatred towards the left, it's all about trying to tear apart and destroy America.